All right, everybody, we are back for episode 98 of the Southern Ontario Dirt Show podcast. My name is Jonathon Howe, and it feels good to be back with you following Osh Weekend and the Northern Nationals. We also had some racing action, I guess like a wrap-up of things from Merrittville that we're going to dive into with my pal Michael Caldwell coming up on this episode. They're right in the thick of it, man. It has been a busy one. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping first and foremost. This is episode 98 brought to you by Van Sickle Pet Value and Lundy's Lane Pet Value. I'd say stop in and get your race tickets, but the Merrittville season is all wrapped up. But you still should go by and support our favorites there throughout the wintertime and the off season. Now, looking ahead at our episode 98 driver, we've got sprint car driver. This one coming in from my pal Fran. Statman Fran says 98 sprint car driver Jonah Mutton. So there's your driver for episode 98 of the show. It's a busy time. Like I know that racing season's kind of winding down. Seems we're looking ahead at like the Fulton 200. You're looking ahead at Super Dirt Week. Nationals just wrapped up. There's still some racing to be had at Humberstone, at Brighton, South Buxton, all that stuff. But for me, my gears have shifted completely. It has been a crazy end of the summer. I'm getting married in like 22 days, I think, from today, as of recording this. I've got my band, Green White Checkered. They just put out a new EP today, as of recording this. You can go and check that out wherever you get your music. We're playing a show tomorrow in Niagara Falls on Queen Street at the at No-Tel Cocktail, which is a bar set up inside of a hair salon. So if you're driving by and you're like, I only see a sign for Kelly's, that's where you're going in. Okay. And beyond that, I also started another podcast called Let's Make a Playlist for all my music fans. So it's a busy time in my world, and racing, I don't want to say it's taking a backseat to it, but with everything else going on, it's kind of been a little bit all over the place. And I haven't had as much time to focus on racing as I did last year, or as much in general that I wanted to. So expect some probably like infrequent episodes. I'm going to drop whenever I can over the next month and a half, but between the wedding, honeymoon, time away, lack of stories to talk about in terms of racing, probably going to go on a bit of a sporadic run of podcasts, and then we're going to take a little hiatus and then come back probably November, December with something kind of interesting that I've got in the works, I think, for this show going forward. So watch for that. I want to break down the Nationals, the Northern Nationals. That's kind of where I'm going to focus in terms of a race report, running over the recap of that. We'll start with the Northern Thunderstock Nationals, the inaugural Northern Thunderstock Nationals, which were led to green by Dave Bailey and Rob Murray in a 30-car field for 35 laps, which I think 35 for the Thunderstocks is just like the perfect amount of laps, I think ultimately we've seen some 50 lappers and some even longer than that throughout recent time. And I just think that's a little too much, but 35 felt right on the money for this type of event and this kind of magnitude of an event. And you know what? I think it was very appropriate. The big dog, Ryan Beagle, takes home the win. Started ninth in this one, drove his way up there and got the win ahead of Dave Bailey and Ron Logie. Probably the three best Thunderstock drivers on any given track, any given night, finishing 1, 2, 3 in the Thunderstock Nationals. It was very appropriate. And then right there too, Mark Fawcett and Justin Ramsey, can't really count them out either, finishing 4th and 5th as well. But how about the big dog? I mean, good on him. I think this is the kind of season and the kind of thing that we wanted to see from Beagle. I think we expected him to have this kind of bounce back after, I think it's too cruel to say he threw away the championship, because that's not right in 2023. He got beat. He had some trouble on the last night, which probably affected things more than anything. Not the finish to 2023 that he wanted, but 2024 was definitely the big dog's year, and he picks up that $5,000 check for winning by just over a half second ahead of Bailey. So fun stuff there. Also featured on that night, they raced a champion Sportsman. Not a surprise to see Cody McPherson go out and win a Sportsman race. And he really has a lot of love for Oshweekend as well. So it kind of makes sense that, in an ROC race, Cody McPherson would be the one to get it done. How about Scott Wood, though, jumps back in a Sportsman, driving the 20 and finishes in second. Bill Bleach with third place finish. Nigel Pendakoski, a very impressive run for the rookie, in fourth. And James Friesen rounds out your top five in that Race of Champions Sportsman modified feature from Oshweekend. And that was your Thursday night action. Moving over to the Friday, which was the Northern Crate Nationals. Bit of a busier night in terms of racing that night, but we'll focus heavily on the nationals, the national crate sprints, which I kind of felt like same as night one, where you put Dave Bailey on the pole. I kind of figured it's gonna be tough to get by him. Like that kind of might seal the deal on this race before it even begins, and that's kind of how I felt with Brett Stratford starting on pole alongside Keegan Baker for again 35 laps. It's a perfect distance for the crates to go. I felt like, anyways. But, here we go. That's 71. I mean, we've seen that car win in the past at Oshweekend a lot, especially in big money events. And even with a different driver, Brent Bigelow, he stepped up to the plate and got the win to become the Northern Crate Nationals champion and keep that title in the MBR family. He wins it ahead of Billings. Stratford was in third. Lee Ladiseur and Jesse Costa round out your top five in that one. And it kind of felt like, again, that like Brent kind of peaked at the right time of that race, it felt like, in terms of when he was able to get to the front. Lap traffic really kind of jammed up Billings, who was in front for most of that event, and I thought had it won late. And then as I was watching, I was like, oh my God, Bigelow's going to get him. He's going to catch him. And sure enough, man, that was a great drive. Such a smart drive from Brent. You got to give him credit. And I just felt, I didn't feel terrible for Billings because that's just one of those racing deals. You're going to have lap traffic, and how you negotiate it is going to be so, so important going forward. But man, it almost, I don't know. I just wish they could have like raced it out to the line a little bit more. But either way, what a good race. I thought ultimately we got a good one for the Northern Crate Nationals. That was a busy night too. There was twin 15 for the 360 sprint cars that night. Nikki Sheridan picks up a win in one of them over Jason Varney and Mike Bowman. A main 2 goes to Joe Tranka ahead of Max Stambaugh and Jordan Thomas in that 15 lap feature. Track position, obviously pretty important with just 15 laps on the board, but man, Nikki Sheridan was fast. We'll talk a little bit about that 45 and just some of the other stars from the 360 show on Saturday. But ultimately, a little preview, a little taste of what we got there. Middleport Mechanical Thunder Sox, the very next night, they were back at it. Bailey wins a 20-lap feature over Beagle, Brock Gregory, Trevor DeBoer, and Jim Lampman. You round out your top five there. And the mini stocks, Jason Tolton gets a win ahead of Julian Hills, Alex Riley, Dusty DeBoer, and Jeremy Cooper. Rounds out your top five in that one for night 2 of the Northern Nationals. This was the Northern Crate Nationals. Let's move on to the Northern Sprint Car Nationals, the 20th edition of the Northern Sprint Car Nationals at Oshweekend. And, well, what a race. What a fantastic race that really was, man. I was watching the end of that one, and I really didn't feel like I knew who was going to win, especially when we got that restart. But before we even got a restart, Dylan Westbrook had to fight his way through, ends up into the actual A main after having to come through the B, starts on the 10th row and makes his way forward, gets up to 5th place with 10 laps to go. And I was like, oh, here we go. It's the Westbrook show. He's going to run him down. He's going to get them all. And Westbrook's just going to put the ultimate exclamation point on what was one of the most dominant sprint car years I think I've ever seen in my short time calling dirt racing around Southern Ontario. I mean, the guy was just on fire. But, of course, Nationals night has to fight his way through and ends up almost sort of getting there. And then it all kind of goes horribly wrong. Contact between himself and Jason Varney inside the top 5 leads to both cars crashing, especially Westbrook took a pretty hard hit into the inside wall in turn 1. And he kind of flipped over and got up in the air and came back down. He was ultimately all right, as was Barney. But that sets up a 3-lap dash. And I think on the dash, I didn't know who to pick. I felt really confident in Ryan Turner being up there. But Nikki Sheridan was right there. And I think if Nick had more green flag laps, I kind of wonder. I kind of wonder if he would have been able to run him down, assuming those last 10 laps go green, rather than getting that that 3 lap shootout. Um, man, I don't know. I I don't know. I mean, I also just read too as I was going through the notes of that race that Sheridan actually ended up running out of fuel in that one, so kind of a bummer there. Hansen ended up taking the final podium spot, which again, even at one point, I was looking at Josh Hansen. I was kind of like, I think Hansen might be able to get up there and challenge, but ultimately nobody got up there to challenge Ryan Turner. I mean, just a great drive, and I kind of think this is another one similar to Beagle, how it kind of felt like Ryan Turner was poised for number 3 last year. I know Mike Bowman had all the momentum on his side, but there was just something about that 15 car that I had circled all weekend, and he just never quite got it to materialize the way he needed last year in 2023 to take the Nationals. This year, though, really that car was stout, and Ryan was stout. Like, great driving, no mistakes. Um, did not give in to the pressure. There was great moves, aggressive racing inside the top 5 behind him, guys coming with runs, and I thought for sure there was going to be somebody that gets up there, and it just never quite materialized. But man, what a race. Like, go if you haven't gone back and watched that on GeForce, like, just go back and watch. Like, the amount of sliders, the great quality of racing. I really thought the 360s brought it this year. And I don't know if maybe just the field is more even and that's why it felt like it, but for whatever reason, that race everybody was just bringing it, and there was an elevated sense of competition, an elevated sense of um, every moment, every lap, every pass mattered, and it had to happen in that moment. And guys were taking chances that you definitely would not see in the third week of the season at Weekend or whatever. But that's what happens when you have $30,000 on the line, right? So ultimately, it is Ryan Turner winning the Northern Sprint Car Nationals, his third the Northern Sprint Car Nationals. He wins it ahead of Nick Sheridan. He wins it ahead of Josh Hansen. In fourth was last year's winner, Mike Bowman. And Corey Turner rounds out your top 5 in that one. Over in the crate sprint side of things, Brent Bigelow ends up sweeping, or at least going back to back in terms of crate sprint races. Actually, I guess it would be a sweep because they didn't have them on Thursday. So sweep of the weekend for that 71 in the crate division. But yeah, go back and watch that. If you haven't watched the Northern Sprint Car Nationals, just go watch it, man. What a race. What a drive. Congrats again to Ryan Turner, a very deserving winner, and definitely a driver that I think is going to, I don't want to say be favored, but he's got a great chance at 4 next year. But then I look at this podium picture and I look at Nick Sheridan there in second, and I look at Josh Hansen and the strides that both those drivers made in 2024. Watch out for them in 2025. I think, if anything, yes, Westbrook had one heck of a year in his dominance over the 360 class, but I think by the end of the season, what we saw was that everybody started to slowly but surely catch up. At least that's what I felt like. That was my vantage point. Maybe you disagree with me, and that's all right if you do. I would love to hear about it. Either way, you can email the show, Southern Ontario Dirt Show at gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on the videos on YouTube, on Spotify, get a hold of me through social media, whatever it is. I would appreciate that. And I'm going to throw now to I want to catch up with my pal Michael Caldwell, because I think the majority of my focus in 2024 ended up being on Merrittville. With the limited amount of time I unfortunately had for consuming racing and watching racing and covering racing this year, Merrittville just kind of ate up all my time. And I feel like I haven't really gotten a chance to break down the points. And we made some predictions ahead of last year. You can go back and look at the episode or listen to the episode where we made our predictions and see how far off we were. I mean, we made some pretty obvious choices. There were definitely some surprises. I don't think either of us saw as many first-time winners as there was this year at Merrittville in all of the divisions, minus, I guess, the Hoosier stocks. They didn't have any first-time winners by my count anyways. But, yeah, ultimately it was a great year at Merrittville. We do a pretty good job of recapping that, and I want to throw to that. And, like I say, we'll be back probably not next week, maybe 2 weeks from now. Maybe we'll get back with an episode from Humberstone. Oh, which reminds me, in case anybody didn't see it, they have moved the SOS, the 360 sprint cars, have moved off the Friday night at Humberstone. Those back-to-back final shows at Humberstone Speedway, the 360s. A bunch of guys expressed interest in going to the Empire's Super Sprints event, which I believe is at Fulton, if I'm not mistaken, on the 4th or on the 5th. And then the next night, whatever it is, the 5th or the 6th, they will be back to close out Humberstone Speedway in a big way. So, ultimately, yes, not 2 nights of 360 sprint car racing, but again, it kind of works out. I think the Friday, and then it makes it that much more special to just see them once on Saturday. Looking forward to seeing the end of Humberstone, and we'll do some coverage of that weekend. And if I can, maybe get a podcast going with some people sharing some memories of that facility that we are unfortunately losing at the end of 2024. So, with that said, I'm going to bring in Michael Caldwell, our guest on the Southern Ontario Dirt Show podcast. Folks from Van Sickle Pet Value and PV on the Lane aren't just fans of your favorite four-legged friends, they are race fans too. That's why Jeff and Rhonda Riley, as well as their staff, have teamed up with Merrittville Speedway to make your race day experience more convenient. Race fans can now pick up tickets for race nights while grabbing the highest quality food, treats, toys, and accessories for their pets from the St. Catharines and Niagara Falls locations. Beat the box office and the crowds. Their support of local racing doesn't just stop with you, the race fan. Catch the Van Sickle Pet Value PV on the Lane 4 cylinders racing at Merrittville Speedway throughout the 2024 season. Check out Van Sickle Pet Value across from Best Buy and Walmart on 4th Avenue in St. Catharines, and PV on the Lane at the corner of Kayla Road and Lundy's Lane, Highway 20. And joining me now on the Southern Ontario Dirt Show, it's my pal Michael Caldwell, who's been spent most of the Saturday nights up in the booth for the most part. I think there's not too many that you didn't miss this year between filling in on the scoring stuff with the computers, helping out your sister, and just generally being a fan. But thanks for coming back on the show. We kind of did this at the beginning of the Merrittville year, so I kind of figured it's a good chance to have you back on and redo this thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me back. It was a fun year out at Merrittville and all over the Western New York, Southern Ontario this year. Great racing all around.
Yeah, far from over
Yeah.
still. I mean, we got Humberstone to go a couple nights there. Obviously, lots of Western New York stuff, Super Dirt Week. We got the World Finals. But locally, it's all over but the crying. And we made some predictions preseason, or I guess maybe after the Spring Sizzler kind of thing or something like that. I thought I had them written down for the audience. Couldn't find them. But I'm going to do a little pre-show ramble. So you're probably already hearing this part, and you probably already know how well we did with our predictions based on whatever it was, episode something or other back in April or May. But for the most part, I think we were pretty bang on it because we picked a lot of the heavy hitters to do well this year. I'm looking at the modifieds right now in the top 10 in points. Gary Lindbergh wraps up the year with 8 wins in the mods, which, I mean, I think we both agree that Gary was probably the favorite to win that division. But did you see 8 wins out of him?
Definitely not. I definitely thought he was gonna have a successful bounce back year. I was thinking maybe 4 or 5 wins, but it was just a dominant year for the 37. After everything that happened last year, they were back on a mission this year, um, and they didn't lay off the gas pedal. That's for sure.
No, and it's funny because that's half of the features with all the rainouts and stuff that we had. 16 total features for the mods this year at Merrittville, and Gary ends up winning half of them. And it's so funny for me because I felt like, you know, I kind of felt like he had a quiet start to the year. At the beginning of the year, we saw Justin Sharp jump out, grab a win. We saw Gary get a couple. Freddie Carlton grabbed a couple. He ends up finishing third in points with 2 wins on the year. We saw Chad Brockman grab a feature win, but overall, it was kind of. I felt like right up until July, it was kind of anybody's race in the modifieds, and then all of a sudden, Gary just put on a clinic through July and August.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, it was definitely a slow start for the 37S. It seemed like everything that could go wrong for him over the first few weeks happened to him. It was starting to look like it was going to come down to Bicknell, Carlton, and Brackman for the title, but just persistence by that team throughout the year and just started rattling off wins, and they were there at the end when it
Yeah,
counted.
Yeah, he mentioned it. I remember talking to him in the final night of the year, I guess it was the final night for the mods. It was the final points night. And he won the John Spencer, won the title at the same time. And Gary kind of pointed to the fact that had a couple of DNFs to start the year, and you don't usually win championships like that. But when you reel off 8 wins, 13 top fives in 16 races, that'll put you up there in the standings. Pete Bignell brings it home second in the championship standings with 10 top fives, 13 top tens. No wins on the year, though, for Mr. Smallblock. Freddie Carlton was third in points with 2 wins, 12 top tens on the year. Brad Rouse gets a win. His win came a little bit later on in the season, but good for him. James Friesen, another one who won a little bit later on. Justin Sharp's got a win. Jay Mallory, Scott Wood, Shane Pierce, and Dylan Davidson rounded out your top 10 in points. Going over those names there, was there anybody that jumps out to you that either maybe you expected more of, or maybe you were just surprised at?
Um, I think just kind of looking at the wins, I think it was just the amount of like rookies and like guys that are returning to the modified class over after quite a few years away from it. I think seeing guys like James Friesen, Justin Sharp getting back into victory lane very quickly after moving up from the Sportsman. I think
Yeah,
that's what kind of stands out to me the most is just how deep this field actually really was this year. We did see one car dominating, but this field was deep.
I
And
agree. Like, it was one of those years where, like, it again, it kind of felt like, other than Gary, nobody could really take the reins as like the dominant car, which again I think is also why Gary ended up with so many wins, because there was week to week, you didn't know who was going to bring the fight to him. I'm looking
right.
over a list of first time feature winners on the year. We'll go through that for each division. But in the mods, you mentioned him. Justin Sharp picks up his first modified feature win. How about Shane Pierce? Was on the show, and then I think like a week later, 2 weeks later, breaks through for his first feature win. That was great to see. In the mods as well, James Friesen. Feels weird to say that, but yeah, he's a modified winner now at Merrittville.
Yeah.
After so much success in the Sportsman division, you'd think it should have kind of just came easy to him. But he's another guy that I had on the show to talk about it, and it's like, no, man, this stuff's hard. So the modifieds were a great division. I don't let the win totals and the point total at the top of the standings fool you. It was a very competitive year, and I think that's a really good sign going into next year.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely going to be an exciting year coming up in 25
I, th-
for the
I
mods.
Another one that I'm looking forward to 2025 for is the Sportsman division. Again, this is another one where Cody McPherson ends up picking up the title. I'm pretty sure we talked about that. Um, I don't know if either of us saw him winning 11 races out of 14, and I think his worst finish at Merrittville was third, fourth, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I believe third. Could you could be right on the fourth there, but not many races off the podium for the seven. That's for sure.
No, he had 14 features run, as did almost pretty much everybody in the field this year, at least in the top 10, and 14 top fives. So you never finished outside the top five in that lucky number seven. I mean, well, there's not much else you can say about Cody McPherson's year. But I think there's a lot to be said about this division because it was kind of the youth movement. This was one of those years where it's a transition year, a lot of young talent, and a lot of them showed up in big ways with solid runs either on the podium or even a few of them breaking through for wins.
Oh, absolutely. This was probably one of the more exciting classes to watch this year. Just other than Cody, like it was so unpredictable. It could have went in so many ways. You have a guy like Tyler Pachalski breaking out and grabbing his first two career wins. Um, Matteo Panante grabbing a win after only a couple years in the car. Um, yeah, very exciting year.
Yeah, it was wild to see, right? It For me, looking at the youth movement, like I say, a lot of young talent in that Sportsman division. You look at some of the guys that have been around a little longer, like Noah Mamo. He's been there the last couple of years, right? Tyler Pachalski, one of those ones that's been around for a couple of years on and off. But then you look at some of like the rookies or some of the drivers that have only a few starts under their belt. Nigel Pentecoski ends up eighth in points with 6 top 10s, 2 top 5s on the year in that 78 junior. And I think we can attribute a lot of his, especially later season success, to all the success he was having Friday nights in the novice class over at Ransomville. You mentioned Matteo Panante. He breaks through, jumps in that 20 car for Jay Mallory after he had some engine issues. Matteo did in the 99P Junior and picks up a win, but then comes right back the next week and was taking the fight to Cody in his own car once again. And Jacob Chevalier just ends up just outside the top 10 in points finishing in the 11th spot. But he also missed 2 features overall compared to some of his contenders. So I'm going to go over the whole top 10 here in points. Cody McPherson finishes with the top spot. Adam Leslie brings it home second in points. Now, not a win for the Sterling Lubricants 15 ride of Adam Leslie, but does post an impressive 13 top 10s on the year and 10 top 5s. He was arguably the next best driver and next best most consistent driver. But if I told you between the two team cars, Adam Leslie, Tyler Pachalski, both driving for the Sterling Lubricants, and they've got that program kind of as team cars. If I told you Adam Leslie was going to go winless and Tyler Pachalski was going to pick up not one but 2 feature wins on the year, you probably would have said I had that backwards at the start of the year, right?
Oh, absolutely. Leslie would probably came into the season as that favorite to be the number two behind Cody. But as I mentioned earlier, like what a year for Tyler Pachalski. Really kind of taking the reins of that 185 and really showing what he's got.
Yeah, I mean they've got that kind of ace in the hole too of having Brad Rouse. I'm pretty sure had pretty heavily involved in that team behind the scenes, and
Yeah.
obviously Brad's got a ton of experience in the Sportsman, knows how to set those race cars up, and is a great shoulder to lean on in that instance. Also, want to give a call to Taylor Vanderzanden. I mean, I know he kind of had that Mace Race Motorsport connection with Noah Mason or Nelson Mason, excuse me, over the last few seasons, and those two, Nelson moves up into the modifieds. Taylor stays down in Sportsman, but has a really respectable year. 7 top 5s, 12 top 10s on the year out of 14 features, ends up third in points. Noah Mamo, I already mentioned him. He brings it home fourth. Tyler Pachalski ends up fifth in points after his 2 wins. That kind of really powers his season. Billy Bleach Jr. was another driver that I don't want to sit here and say that I expected a lot of Billy Bleach Jr. or anything like that, but I kind of thought that 108 program was going to be one of those challenging cars, maybe like a third place kind of car in points. And we just never quite got Billy. He never quite had the chance for that to materialize.
No, for sure. That was definitely another car that I was really watching out for this year. Was Billy Bleach. Still a respectable season, coming home sixth. Um, but yeah, I know he definitely did show some good strides in that Glen Stars Racing 108.
Yeah, I want to point out right behind him in points in seventh, Mitch Dumont. Actually, according to my notes here, according to the Merrittville Speedway website, I'm looking at the points. He missed a feature and still ended up seventh in points. 11 top 10s on the year, 2 top 5s for that 28. Give a call to Mitch. I mean, another one of those drivers that I kind of thought might break through and get a win or two on the year, and just it never quite materialized. I mean, how could it when Cody's as dominant as he was? But give a call to Mitch Dumont there. I mean, one less feature on the books, and he still ends up in the 7th spot in points. That's impressive. Pentecoski, I mentioned, he brings it home 8th. Curtis Friesen, 9th place finish in points, and Matteo Panante rounds out your top 10 in points in the Sportsman. Again, we've talked a lot about that youth movement. You never know what's going to happen with Cody McPherson if he decides to travel more with the Sportsman. You never know what might come in 2025. But of the drivers that we did see on that younger side of the program in the Sportsman, is there anybody, Michael, for you that jumps out as one to watch to take the next step and maybe lead the charge of that youth movement next year?
I think both Nigel Pentecoski and Matteo Panante. I think those are the two drivers that really stand out for me. Mateo didn't have the strongest first half of the year, but he was arguably the second best car at Merrittville over that last 4 or 5 week span.
Yeah.
And then Nigel, any driver that you talk to, they're going to tell you the best way to get better is seat time. And I think running Ransonville in that novice class, getting those wins, I think it just boosted the confidence. And you could definitely see as the year came along, the confidence was there for the 78. And he did have a couple close runs towards the end of the year there.
Yeah, you two of those I definitely agree with as well. For me, the only other one that I would maybe throw into that conversation that I think seat time is definitely going to be what gives this driver the next edge is Jacob Chevalier. He has Cody McPherson kind of touched on their relationship and the fact that Chevalier, I think, has worked on the crew of that 7 car in the past on race nights. He's just a driver that I think when I look at Jacob, I think a little bit of time in the seat, maybe going to Friday nights at Ransomville if that's something that their program can swing next year could be really helpful to him because he's just so young, right? He's got so much
Yeah.
time ahead of him that I don't necessarily know if next year's the year that we see that breakout from Jacob, but I mean, there was nights that I was like, that 12 car is pretty bad fast, and I was like, yeah, that's heavy Chevy but junior, I guess, in this
Yeah.
case. So, awesome to see. Moving over to the Hoosier stocks now. Let's recap their season at Merrittville. At the top of the standings, 14 features, 14 top tens, 13 top fives, and 4 wins. It doesn't get much more consistent than Dave Bailey. What a drive, what a year for him in that 49 bunch. Picks up yet another win. I want to say that's 6 track titles. Maybe you know, and you can correct me, but I want to say that's 6 at Merrittville
I don't
alone
know
in
off
this
the top of my
division.
head, but I think you're pretty close on that. Either 5 or 6. It's definitely,
I think it's 6. I thought that's what
yeah.
Statman Fran told me at the end of the year. So I apologize if I got the stat wrong, Fran. But Dave Bailey ends up with the championship over Mark Fawcett. Now, Mark Fawcett also had 4 wins on the year, 11 top fives, 13 top tens. Something to note as well, though, is that he did have a win that was taken away because of a fuel issue, resulting in a penalty and a failed tech appearance for the driver at a Canfield. Now, I don't remember. Would that have handed the win to Dave? I think it did, right? Did that hand that win to Bailey?
I honestly can't remember off the top of my head.
I can't remember either. I know Bailey was, I mean, obviously would end up finishing second, but man, that would have made the points pretty interesting heading into the final night. I mean, can you imagine if we're getting a showdown like that? Mark Fawcett, I don't, it's not that I didn't see him coming as like the second best threat to Bailey, but I didn't see him having such a gap to um, some of the other contenders, I would say. You know, like when I look through the top 5 in points, Kyle Pelrine right there picks up a win, 12 top tens on the year, very consistent. Pete Reed, 1 win, 7 top fives, 12 top tens, kind of matches right with Kyle Pelrine in terms of some of those statistics. But the gap between, them to Fawcett, it didn't feel like they were as consistently competitive and threatening for wins like Fawcett was to the year. And I really think Fawcett came out of the gates pretty strong and probably I don't want to say lit the fire under Bailey, but it gave Bailey something to chase for sure. I think this year at Merrittville, and that those are 2 guys that I hope we get to see battle again next year because I think Mark Fawcett can reload, come back with a vengeance.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. That was the story of the year, Bailey and Fawcett. Uh, it would definitely, like we discussed, it would be interesting to see where the things would have shaken out if DQ wasn't in the cards. My math is correct. If he ended up a 0 off of that DQ, it would have been a 4 point battle. It maybe even less if it was Bailey that did grab that win.
Yeah, because you got to take those
Um,
whatever the points difference is. If Bailey was second, right? So I can't remember what is it. Is it 2 points separating, 4 points between first and second?
yeah, it's 4 points between first and second, and then second and third. So if that was Bailey that did get the win, that would have been likely a tie going into that final week. So
Yeah, or we'd be looking at even if it all played out and everybody finished the way they did in that final week, we're talking about a tie for the Hoosier Stock title. So, um, yeah,
right.
very interesting. Very interesting to see how that would have played out had that penalty not happened. Rounding at the rest of the top 10 in points, Jason Fontaine, 2 wins on the year, breaks through for 100 career wins this year in 2024. So, big shout out to Jason Fontaine. I mean, the guy races with a lot of passion. He's probably the driver that could have challenged for more wins, but I feel like mechanical issues kind of plagued that 1J throughout the year and really stopped him from being a threat in this title. Otherwise, I think he would have been right up there. Maybe not. I mean, maybe not like lockstep with Fawcett and Bailey, but he could have been like just nipping at their heels, if not even better. I don't know. It's so hard to say with that 1J crew what could have been, but still a great year to knock off 2 wins and 8 top tens and 14 features for Jason Fontaine.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that was definitely to me. That was just definitely one of the better kind of stories throughout the year, is seeing the resurgence of Jason Fontaine. It's good to see him grabbing a couple wins. I mean, he did get one the year before, but there was a long gap before that for him. So it's good to see him running up front again.
Jim Lampman finishes seventh in the championship after a win early in the year. Go Fast Teeple ends up eighth in title. Chris Crow ninth. Rob Disher rounds out your top 10 in Hoosier stock points. Um, were you kind of surprised by, I don't know how to say this. Car counts for sure were a bit of a topic of discussion. Obviously, the reopening or the launch of Southern Ontario Motor Speedway, South Buxton area, that changes things for the Hoosier Stock car count on Saturday because we're not getting those cars hauling out our way. Um, there was a lot of drivers who put a lot of focus into Oshweek, and it felt like I think as well that we didn't see as much. Like Ryan Beagle didn't show up as much as I thought we might have seen him to start the year. Do you have any concerns about this Hoosier Stock class? Because on paper, it feels like it could be deeper than it is.
Oh, for sure. Like you said, on paper, the car counts are there in Southern Ontario. It's just Oshwegan. It's a highlight track for a lot of people, so they love running there on their Fridays. And it's definitely one of the more entry level classes. So running multiple nights, unless you're a top car, it can be tough. And then having Buxton and Brighton running definitely doesn't help either. Um, I do think that the car counts are there. It would be nice to see it boosted up a little bit. Um, I
Yeah,
think long term, we're just in a little bit of a lull. I think it will bounce back at some point, though.
yeah, it seems to ebb and flow, right? Like we were talking about the concern from the Modlites, and then all of a sudden they showed up very consistently with tons of cars. And last year I think we're boosted by some of the American contenders, but this year I kind of felt like from my vantage point that we didn't need the American contenders because they had such a healthy class. I mean, I'm looking over the points right now. Again, Josh Slider ends up with the title. 14 top tens in 15 features, 14 top fives even. So just a model of consistency for him. And I'm pretty sure the only race he would have been outside the top five if I guess I wouldn't have counted for points. I was going to say the final race of the year, that IMCA championship race, he ended up blowing up, right? But was running. I think he was leading when he blew up. So Josh Slider just put on one heck of a year, one heck of a bounce back year. It feels weird to call it a bounce back because he was right there challenging for the title, but Brent Bigelow was just so obviously the dominant car in the Modlites in 2023, 2024, much more even. I'm looking at the stats here. Brent Bigelow finishes second in the title, 4 wins, 12 top fives, 13 top tens. Probably could have taken the fight to Josh maybe a little bit more in that final feature of the night. Obviously had some bad luck that I talked about and detailed on the podcast in the past. But all in all, going over the points here, uh, good to see two really competitive battles at the top.
Oh, absolutely. This was another very exciting class this year. Um, I don't remember the last time we had like six feature winners. Like it's been so dominated by the sliders and Bigelows over the last few years. It was definitely refreshing this year to see a lot of guys break out.
Yeah, and some guys get back into it. Well, I mean, at the start of the season, did you see RJ Pitts coming back for a win this year?
No,
Well, I mean,
I thought he would be close.
yeah, I thought he was like, oh yeah, he's gonna be one of those guys. He'll be floating around like between fourth and seventh, pretty much every night, kind of doing his thing. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, RJ had a fantastic year. Gets that win, gets that breakthrough win. Picks up 10 top 5s on the year, 12 top 10s, finishes third in points. So great to see out of him. And then we talk about the youth movement in the Sportsman, but we had some really young drivers with some great success. Ryan Anderson picks up not one but two feature wins. First time winner in the division. Wins twice. Finishes in the fourth spot in points after 12 top tens and 15 starts. Pretty awesome and impressive stuff. And another driver that maybe could have taken the fight more to the field, Tyler Winger. 3 wins on the year, but only made 14 feature starts as opposed to the 15 that most drivers got.
Yeah, yeah. No, like we said, it was definitely an exciting year for these guys. would be curious to see how Winger would have been factored in if he did have that extra start there.
Hmm.
I think he still would have been quite a ways out, but he's definitely going to be one to watch for the next couple of years. And then a shout out as well, just outside the top five, Cohen Corbett, another youngster, grabbing another first career win.
Yeah, that was awesome to see. That was really cool to see. I was stoked to see Cohen pick up a win. Leroy Buscom with a great season, 11 top tens, ends up seventh in points. Sean Iftati, another 11 top tens. Anthony Kelly, Niagara Falls guy, got to give him some love. Finishes ninth in points. And Dave Cornish quietly does his thing and gets himself a top 10 in points as well on that 291 ride. And there's a whole bunch more behind these guys. I mean, I think what do we have here? Total 31 different drivers start a feature for the Rona Deutsch Modlites this year at Merrittville. I mean, you got to be stoked about that.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't even tell you the last time we saw a field 23, 24, like a full field of mod lights. It was definitely really nice to see this year.
Yep, and it's one of those things, right? You talk about those ebbs and flows, right? Of drivers that we uh can consistently expect to see, and then all of a sudden the division starts to kind of drop off as some of those drivers maybe move on, hang it up, whatever they do. Last division to talk about here. Let's go over the Van Sickle Pet Value PV on the lane. Four cylinders had the most exciting championship fight. When it was all said and done, Alex Riley wins it by 4 points over Kenny Hare. So fitting that those two were first and second at the end of the race.
Absolutely. That was one of the battles that I was looking most forward to this year. I didn't necessarily think, like, obviously Riley, a defending champ. I didn't necessarily think that Kenny Hare was going to be the number two guy, but that was such a good battle to watch all year long. And to go into the final points night tied for the champ in the championship standings, and then finish one spot apart at the top of the charts. You
Yeah, the
can't ask for it. You can't ask for a better finish than that.
Yeah, the way it played out, I mean, that was so perfect, right? I mean, it was just like that's exactly what you want. You want championship fights coming down to the end, and you want to see the best drivers have to go directly against each other. And I got to give props to Kenny Hare. He had shots that he could have maybe moved Alex Riley or taken some more aggressive racing lines against him. Austin Worcester also kind of was up there playing spoiler in that race, if I remember correctly. But
Yeah,
ultimately, what a battle at the top of the standings. Both drivers finishing inside the top 50, top 10 in every single feature, 15 features in total. Kenny Hare actually had more top fives, 12 to Alex Riley's 11. They both had four wins total. So it was Alex Riley getting the better of some of those top tens that made the difference for him to win the title. A couple of first time winners finishing third and fourth in points. Mason Anderson brings it home third. Randy Alway, another driver, picked up his first feature win this year in that Mustang, lead the Mustang Brigade in fourth in that one.
yeah, absolutely. It was definitely I feel like it was definitely a transitional year for the mod lights. You have heavy hitters like Rothwell and Lafontaine kind of moving on. So to see guys like Anderson, Alway, Hannah Rothwell kind of up at the top there, I think it's definitely safe to say that this division's in good hands going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mini stock program in general is it's super fun. I mean, how many cars by the end of it, we were you got to give the track credit for trying to start as many drivers as you possibly could, but in the end they ended up backing things down a little bit and ultimately it was time to bring in some B mains and stuff by the end of the year, but
Yeah,
it was great. I mean, looking through the rest of this top 10 in points, Austin Worcester was consistently up there. I mean, he had some hard hits too. Basically raced a B car from my understanding. I think from, this third week on. I can't remember what week it was that he took that
yeah,
really heavy hit. Um,
yeah.
totaled
Yeah, I
that
don't
car.
remember all my picks from the start of the year, but I do remember Austin Worcester was my pick in the mini stocks to kind of break that curse of second and thirds.
Yeah.
So kind of a disappointment. Obviously, he did have a rough start to the year, some heavy damage, but still respectable in the top five there.
Yeah, for sure. Hannah Rothwell ends up sixth in points after she picked up her first feature win. She also had some heavy hits and hard hits that kind of maybe affected her ability to be higher up in the points throughout the year. John Lubeck brings it home seventh in points. Olivier Larocque is eighth. Ray Sorrenzia ninth. Sam Iftati rounds out the top 10. And then, you got to give a shout out to the Cuses. I mean, Syracuse just outside the top 10 in points, picked up her first feature win. Braden Cuse got through for a feature win. Sean Cuse also broke through. Those bugs were pretty competitive in the middle portion of the year. Then they took some time off and missed some features, which kind of affected their points in the end of it, all I would say. But ultimately, great runs, great racing from the mini stocks and those full fendered 4-cylinder classes. Now, Michael, I'm looking at a list here of the first time winners on the year. We mentioned the drivers and the mods: Justin Sharp, James Friesen, Shane Pierce breaks through for his first feature win. In the Sportsman, Tyler Pachalski picked up his first feature win. Matteo Panante, first feature win in the Sportsman. In the Modlites, because we didn't have any in the street stocks, Ryan Anderson, a winner for the first time. We had a few others in the Modlites that I think are not actually listed here. Yeah,
Cohen Corbett was another
yeah,
one.
Cohen Corbett is the one that's missing from this list. I'm like, who am I missing on this list here? But yeah, Modlights Cohen Corbett should have picked up his should have been credited as his first feature win as well in that program. And then in the minis, a ton of first timers: Randy Allway, Hannah Rothwell, Mason Anderson, Sierra Cuse, Braden Cuse, Sean Cuse. I think it was Sean's first one. I might be wrong on that one actually.
I think he may have had one at Humberstone
Yeah,
or something like that.
yeah, you might be right, actually. But ultimately, a pretty impressive list of talent for first-time feature winners in 2024. Who's the most surprising? What name jumps out to you the most in terms of a first-time winner this year?
I'm going to go off the board here. I'm going to go to the Modlites, and I think Ryan Anderson and Cohen Corbett. I think those would probably be the two of the more surprising ones for me, just because of how much of a stranglehold the Sliders and Bigelow have had on that on that class. And then just kind of going back to the mini stocks as well. Shout out to the ladies and the mini stocks there. Hannah Rothwell, Syracuse, both breaking through for first career wins.
Yeah.
So I think those would be the kind of the ones that stood out to me the most.
Yeah, Hannah's pace was really impressive. I mean, she makes the switch to the Pontiac G5 or G6. I always forget which one it is. G5, G6, whatever it is, or Cobalt, Chevy Cobalt style body car combination. And it pays dividends. You know, she was trying so hard to make a Volkswagen style race car work the way her dad had for years, and it just wasn't as competitive anymore. And yeah, she made a big stride this year. I think the most surprising thing to me was the fact that James Friesen won a modified race. Not because it's like, oh, it's surprising. It's surprising that it happened in 2024. You would think with the kind of career that James has had and whatever else, like the accomplishments he has, you would think it wouldn't be, you know, the night he turns 40 that we're talking about his first feature win in the mods, but it was, and I'm happy to see it, and it was much deserved. So shout out again to all the first time winners, shout out to all the champions, everybody who had great runs this year, and really shout out to everybody who showed up all season long at Merrittville Speedway to make it interesting and make it fun throughout 2024. And shout out to you, Michael Caldwell. Thank you for coming on and being a part of the show for this week to recap Merrittville with me, and I will see you. You're gonna make it to the Humberstone shows, you think?
I know that I'm planning on going down to Fulton for the Outlaw 200. I'm thinking right now that I'm probably going to do Humberstone on the Friday and then go to Fulton
Yeah.
Saturday, but still up in the air. Most likely I'll be there though.
All right. Well, I'll probably see you at the racetrack, or otherwise we'll see you probably at the banquet or something like that down the line. Thanks again for doing this, buddy.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
There he is, Michael Caldwell on the Southern Ontario Dirt Show podcast. And the checkered is out on another episode of the Southern Ontario Dirt Show, presented by Van Sickle Pet Value and Lundy's Lane Pet Value. Like what you hear? Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with us on Facebook at Southern Ontario Dirt Show, or find us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at SODS_pod. Have a question for the show? Email us at southernontariodirtshow@gmail.com. Thanks for supporting local racing in Southern Ontario, and we'll see you at the track.